Well, it's the final week of the New South Wales election campaign, 3 days to go until voting day, and the polls are tightening. Many thought this would be a Labor landslide, but it's now crunch time and the leaders are neck and neck. Labor leader Chris Minns has promised to lift wages for the public sector and end privatisation. New South Wales Premier Dominic Perrottet is asking voters to re-elect his government for a fourth term. And joining me now live from Sydney is the Premier Dominic Perrottet. It's great to see you a few days out from polling day. Appreciate your time.
Pleasure, Sharri.
Now, we've got a lot to get through tonight, the economy, power prices, managing children with an election campaign. But I want to start with your pitch to voters. Why should voters give your government another term after 11 years?
Well, Sharri, it's our government, the Liberals and Nationals in New South Wales, that have navigated through some very challenging times here in our state, particularly over the last few years through droughts and fires and floods and a 1 in 100 year pandemic. We've built $178 billion of infrastructure, but ultimately it's about the future, and it's the Liberals and Nationals in New South Wales with the long-term economic plan to continue to grow the economy, create jobs, put downward pressure on household prices and budgets, which are doing it tough right now. But ultimately as well to continue to build the infrastructure, the schools, the hospitals, the public transport, the metro trains and the motorways that make a real difference to people's lives.
Well, let's go to the hospital infrastructure. We saw the big story today. The Health Services Union has directed paramedics to dump patients at hospitals. In your view, is this an indication of just how desperate paramedics are, or is this a reckless union stunt?
We provided significant support to paramedics here in our state, Sharri, and a number of times in my previous role as Treasurer and as Premier, during budgets we've stood side by side with paramedics and the Health Services Union in relation to the record investments that we've made. And New South Wales has the strongest health system in the country. When it comes to ramping, we don't have the issues that you're seeing in other states in relation to that. And that hasn't happened by accident. That's because we've invested more. And we've been able to put downward pressure on our emergency departments. During the pandemic, 77% of patients who came into an emergency department were treated on time, compared to 67% across the country. And now we have other premiers coming to New South Wales and health ministers to see how we do it. So we're very confident, very positive about our healthcare in this state.
Well, you say that we don't have the ramping issues that other states have, but the figures show that 1 in 10 people do wait longer than an hour for an ambulance when they're in an urgent situation. This is something I know a bit about. My life nearly ended at the age of 35 because an ambulance took 2 hours to show up. We had to ring 6 times. I've spoken to you about this before. So do you acknowledge there is an issue with people waiting a very long time and in some cases dying before an ambulance arrives?
Yeah, well, Sharri, obviously we've spoken about your situation before, and I understand that obviously coming out of a pandemic as well, there is always significant pressure and strain on any health system. There's no perfect system, we know that. But ultimately, when it comes to the investments that we've made in our state, I think they've been incredibly positive. And if you look at the issue with paramedics, and one of the issues they have now, I've been working with them for some time, and that's on ensuring that we can expand their scope of work, change their conditions to support what is a rapidly evolving profession in paramedics. So that's something that I'm certainly open and have committed to the HSU that we will continue to work on. And obviously we want to have the best health system, whether you live in metropolitan Sydney or regional New South Wales. There are always ways we can make it better. But from where I stand today and I look at the issues facing other states around the country, I think we've got a lot to be proud of here in New South Wales when it comes to our public health system.
Look, Premier, I understand you had an experience recently as well, somewhat similar to mine, where a family member of yours required an ambulance and the wait was so long that you had to call the Health Minister, Brad Hazzard, and he then called the Ambulance Commissioner to get an ambulance to go to your house to help that family member. Is this right?
No, that's not true at all. Obviously, my wife was sick at the time, was paralysed in bed, and I actually spoke to Brad Hazzard in relation to that matter, and an ambulance was organised in the ordinary course.
So your wife required an ambulance and she called 000, but it took so long to come that you had to ring the Health Minister, Brad Hazzard?
No, that's not correct. My wife called me coming back from an event, and I spoke to Brad to get his advice in relation to the situation, and Brad was actually, randomly enough, with the head of ambulance at that point in time, and they said to me, go home, be with your wife, and which I did, and an ambulance was called, and we went to hospital where she was there for a number of days.
I hope she's okay, but just to be clear, it was the ambulance commissioner who called an ambulance to go to your house?
I'm not aware of that. What I'm aware of is the conversation I had with Brad Hazzard and to Don Morgan, who's the head of ambulance in New South Wales, and they said, look, you go home and wait for an ambulance.
So the Health Minister or the ambulance commissioner called the ambulance for your wife?
I'm not sure of those details. What I do know is that I called Brad Hazzard, spoke to Don Morgan, and their advice was, no, you should get home. She'll need an ambulance, and an ambulance was called out.
Do you understand that most people in New South Wales wouldn't have the access to call the Health Minister or the Ambulance Commissioner when they need an ambulance, that 1 in 10 people are waiting more than an hour for an ambulance, that my 1-year-old was nearly left without a mother because an ambulance took 2 hours to come, and you were able to get the Ambulance Commissioner and the Health Minister to organise an ambulance to your house?
Well, I certainly didn't ask for any favours in relation to that, Sharri. I'd spoken to Brad and who was randomly enough in a meeting at that point in time with Don Morgan. They said you should go home, and an ambulance was called out in the ordinary course.
So at no point had you or your wife or any member of your family initially called for an ambulance and was told that it would take about 40 minutes or there'd be a long wait?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Okay. I mean, you've been defending the ambulance system during this election campaign, you know, when you've just had your own experience of having to get the ambulance commissioner involved to get an ambulance to your house. Do you think that was in any way misleading?
Well, I reject the proposition in the question, Sharri. That was not the situation that occurred. I was on the way from an event. I actually called the Health Minister for advice in relation to what I should do. As a friend, he said, he's then put on Don Morgan, who, as I said, was the Commissioner. They advised me to go home.
Why would you call the Health Minister for advice instead of a doctor, respectfully?
Well, Brad and I are very close. I often speak to Brad on a whole range of issues in relation to matters such as that. That's certainly not uncommon. I certainly wasn't asking for any special advice or consideration in relation to that matter, and he will support that, as will Don Morgan, the head of Ambulance New South Wales.
Okay, let's move on to a range of other issues. The energy market operator has warned that New South Wales faces looming blackouts. Power bills are also going up. What can you do to help families, and why won't you consider the proposition put by Labor leader Chris Minns to buy a Raring power station if necessary, if that's what's required to keep the lights on?
Yeah. Well, the first thing I'd say there, Sharri, is under our policy, there'll be $250 off every energy bill in New South Wales for every family. In addition to that, every household in New South Wales. In addition, we have a roadmap, a long-term roadmap that will drive $32 billion of private sector investment. And one particular area that we're focused on is ensuring that we get the Narrabri gas pipeline up and running as quickly as possible. And I've certainly met with Santos and the planning department here in New South Wales, because that project has taken way too long to get off the ground. Currently, surveying is occurring in that area around Narrabri, but that pipeline itself will supply up to half the needs of businesses and households in New South Wales. So under our approach is immediate relief. Under Labor here in New South Wales, 1.5 million families will miss out in relation to that relief.
But there is still an energy issue.
But ultimately, it's about making...
If EMO is warning that there might be blackouts and that there's an issue with energy reliability, there is still an issue here. Do you think ideology, particularly when it came to Matt Keane as Energy Minister, has got in the way of a confidence of supply?
Not at all. We're ensuring that we protect electricity today and into the future. A long-term approach to drive renewable energy into the future, and that's part of the transition that we have in New South Wales, but at the same time ensuring that we have the support today. And our plan does exactly that here in New South Wales, short-term relief for families and households, and at the same time driving $32 billion of investment into the future. But gas is going to be a critical part of that. And there's been too much talk in relation to the Narrabri gas pipeline. I've called that in as critical infrastructure. There's a reservation policy associated with that project, and I'm completely committed to getting it up and running as soon as possible.
Okay, the economy internationally is looking volatile. We've seen the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank and also the acquisition of Credit Suisse. What can you do to help protect people in New South Wales and our financial institutions as the economy is looking so difficult this year?
Well, we've got to continue the strength of the New South Wales economy here in our state, Sharri, and that's why through our policies of lower taxation, less regulation, continuing to build the infrastructure to make a difference to people's lives is what will set up our people for dealing with the current challenges we face, but also those challenges that are coming our way. And as a state, we've certainly navigated through some pretty uncharted waters. During the pandemic, lost over 200,000 jobs. We've recovered all of those.
Yes.
And at the same time kept businesses going. So confidence is key, particularly as those global headwinds are coming our way, where businesses we know, not just around the country, but globally, are concerned and jobs are at risk. So ultimately keeping downward pressure on taxes, continuing to free up businesses to invest in the capital, to invest in labour. That's how we can navigate these difficult challenges that are facing our country.
Now, the poll race is tightening. It's neck and neck. You could very well be elected Premier on Saturday. If you aren't, are you looking at a future career in federal politics? You're still young, you're early 40s.
No, Sharri, I'm not. I'm very much focused on this job. This is being Premier of the largest state in the country is a very important job, and one that I'm very humbly and privileged to serve the people of New South Wales. And we've worked tirelessly over our time in office to take New South Wales from a very dark place to a very strong place. There are economic headwinds coming our way and those challenges, and I'm very much focused on the future here in New South Wales.
Yeah. Well, commentators like Joe Hildebrand wrote today that you could pull off a miracle victory like Scott Morrison did in 2019. Do you think you can win?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm not here to win for myself, Sharri, or win for the Liberal Party or the National Party. I'm here to win for the people of New South Wales, because I know that it's our plan that will ensure that New South Wales families are looked after today, and ultimately that we set up the long-term security of every single person across New South Wales. So we've been prosecuting that case on the campaign trail. There's a few days to go, and we'll continue to get that message out. All
right. Premier Perrottet, thank you very much for your time this evening. And for viewers, save the date for the final must-watch showdown of the New South Wales election campaign. Dom Perrottet and Chris Minns face off in front of undecided voters tomorrow at the Sky News Daily Telegraph People's Forum.